welcome to Getting Your Money's Worth, the show that focuses on value. Our guest today is Kal Chany, author of Paying for College Without Going Broke. That's a big title. And this is the updated version that will soon be out for purchase.
Correct.
Okay. Paying for College Without Going Broke. Well, there should be a stampede for this book, Kal. Hi, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you.
We're living in a time now where there's something very close to 10% unemployment reported. We're not so sure about that number. About a 15% homeowner default rate, something like a 20 to 25 to 30% decline in home prices, and yet college costs continue to spiral. What's going on?
Well, in part, it's a bit of a Chevis Regal pricing in Sherwood Forest, in that people perceive based on what they charge is the quality of the school. But it's Sherwood Forest in part because, say the expenses of the school go up 2%, and the students 50% are on 8. Well, they have to raise the cost 4% because the people who can afford to pay the full freight in part are going to subsidize those who can't.
And the people that can afford to pay the full freight are declining, are they not? Or are they?
That's been a problem, yes. They've had to be more liberal in terms of that. There's unprecedented demand for the funds, and that's the key for people to understand. There is plenty of aid still available. Over $120 billion in assistance is available.
100 and what?
About 120 billion.
Billion.
And the majority of students at campuses don't pay the full freight because higher education is a discounting industry. But the
What do you
key
mean by
is,
discounting industry?
well, the prices are set artificially high, knowing full well that the majority of people aren't going to be able to afford those prices. So it's like going on an airplane. If you ask the people on your left, your right, in front, and behind you, they all pay different fares from what you paid. So that's the important thing to realize in terms of not to be intimidated by the sticker prices, but to be savvy about the aid process.
Now, I want to just stop right there because you said a mouthful. After all, you compare a college education to the airline, and we know that. Left to right, front and center, behind you, in front of you, it makes sense. People have all different. But I thought that what you pay for college is a very rigorous standard based upon how much income you say, and if you're here, it's there. I thought it was a science. Yet you use the word savvy.
Right.
Consumer.
Well, because
so can you straighten this out?
Sure, no problem. And that you hit on that in part. How much aid you get and how much you ultimately pay. In other words, what your net tuition is, net of financial aid, in part depends upon how savvy you are in terms of applying for the assistance. Most people, when they apply for aid, it's a lottery approach. That is, there's money there, maybe I'll get lucky, I'll fill out the forms and hope for the best.
Throw it against the wall.
Right.
If it lands, it lands, and if it doesn't, right.
Right, but in the book, we stress the importance of planning ahead as early as 9th or 10th grade to maximize your eligibility for aid, to understand the eligibility formulas, and to know how your numbers fit into the formulas and how to present your case to best advantage, so that when you fill out the aid applications and go through the financial aid process, which you have to do each year for college, that you'll show the maximum eligibility.
And this strategy is in your book.
Right, the strategy's in the book, and that's also what I do professionally for my clients.
Tell me something, Kal. Is it fair to say that what a parent pays or what a person pays for their college education is negotiable?
I wouldn't use the N word.
That's
not a good thing to say.
So what's a good
in part,
substitute?
it is that there are legitimate strategies you can use to position yourself to best advantage to get the most aid. And if the aid package is not enough, you wouldn't want to go back to the college and say, I want to negotiate this. You'd say, I want to request reconsideration based on the following circumstances. But the key of that and the success of that is having some understanding of the eligibility formulas and how your situation fits into them. Because if you don't know how they determine your eligibility for aid, if you don't know how the process works, when you're talking to the aid office at the school, you're not going to know what factors can influence their decision to give you more money. So while the theory is money goes to people who need it, the reality is it goes to people who best understand how to navigate the process.
Okay, so that's where your word savvy comes in. And you talk about this strategy and you're paying for college without going broke. I want to ask you something else, though. You talk about, if you don't know the strategy, is financial aid dependent on formulas that are set by each college, or is there a standard across the board?
Okay, that's a good point. The need-based aid, that is the financial aid that's awarded based on one's ability to pay. There are formulas that the federal government has to determine eligibility for assistance. There are also other formulas that may be used by the college to award their own funds. But it's not as specific as the IRS. This is your income, these are your credits, this is what you owe based on the table.
So you can't look at some guide and say, okay, I fit here, I fit there.
It's not that easy. And the schools, of course, when they're awarding their own funds outside of the government aid, they could take a soft read of the application. Let's say they really want the student because they're a special talent. They need maybe a quarterback for the football team, or they need
some
a
kind of
cellist,
musician or something,
right, for the chamber orchestra. They could then take a softer read on those numbers and say, you have higher need for aid, because in part how much aid you get is a function of how badly the school needs you going there. So that's some other positioning that you can do, looking at schools where your grades, your SAT scores are going to place you in the top 25% of the class. That will make you more attractive to the school. They may give you a preferential aid package and say you have higher need than some student who's barely getting in with the admission criteria.
Applying for colleges and getting admitted is already, for many students and many parents, an angst-driven process. Now we've added this another whole layer on about, oh my God, am I filling these in right? Am I saying the right thing? Am I not saying the right thing? It's a pretty heavy load.
Right, it is. And that's important, though, to do planning ahead for financial aid.
Okay, let's talk about this planning ahead.
Right.
You said something about doing it in 9th grade, 10th grade. What do you mean? Is that what you mean, like a 529 plan or something like that?
Well, that could be required when the student's born, the 529 plans, which are tax advantage savings plans. But the eligibility formulas used to determine how much aid you get take a snapshot of your financial circumstances. There's income and assets that are assessed. The income
back when your kid is 15, 16.
Opens in January of the junior year in high school till December 31st of the senior year in high school.
Okay.
That's the base income year. So let's say you're going to use stock to pay for college, and this stock now has gone up a bit in value. You bought it at a low. It's gone up. You have a capital gain. If you sell it when the child's in 9th or 10th grade, that capital gain isn't going to affect your income and your aid eligibility.
Okay, let's go back. So the eligibility is a year, it starts in the middle of a junior year.
For freshman year, assuming you're going to go from high school directly to college, that's going to be the year that starts January when the junior year, because they're looking
January
at the
junior year,
in most cases at the calendar year preceding the academic year you're seeking money. Again, you have to reapply for aid. Every year,
but you
so you want to focus on
advanced planning, so that if you're going to reap capital gains or something, you get that out of the picture by January of the junior year.
Right. You want to minimize your income after January 1st of the junior year. Certain asset strategies, and we have tips about that. There's a whole chapter in the book about that. Yes, and special situations if you're the student's parents are divorced, separated, or were never married, things about remarriage.
So there are
all those strategies. It's important to know in advance because the formulas are rather rigid. Most people, though, when they apply, they wait till it's time to fill out the form. They send them in. The forms themselves don't give you the formula, so you have no way of knowing how the combinations of answers influence your eligibility.
Considering the economic debacle we're in now, what about folks who may own a house and but everything that they own, stocks or whatever, bonds, have decreased in value? Are you eligible to show that also?
Okay, for federal aid,
how do you do that?
For federal aid and money from the state of New York, the grants from the state if you go to a school within the state, or federal aid if you go to any approved federal school.
By the way, this is true for public as well as private?
Public as well as private. The federal aid formula does not look at the value of the home at all. So if you have equity in home, it doesn't matter. Assets you have in retirement accounts. Most schools don't look at that
401ks, that's out of the picture.
Right. In most cases, they don't look at the 401k funds you've accumulated. However, the contributions you make tax deferred during that income year that starts after January 1 of the junior year, they will add that back as untaxed income. Except for the state of New York, they don't look at that. So there are different criteria for different programs, and you need to be savvy about that to know how to position yourself to best advantage. Most people, they don't do that work, and it is some extra work, but I tell families this is like a second job, but the pay's not so bad, because if you're savvy and do this and get thousands of dollars more in assistance, probably pays more than your regular job.
I suppose it's the same thing as hiring, a well-versed accountant to file your income tax returns.
Right.
In fact, I think you make some comparison to the taxpayer and the IRS as and the parent and the financial fund officer.
The financial aid officer, right. Because that's a mistake that a lot of people make, is they assume when they're going to the college, they're going to show them how to get the most aid. But the schools are really rationing out the money, and they're trying to figure out how much Are you willing to pay and still come to our school? How little aid do we need to give you? And that doesn't mean the people who work in the aid office are bad. But you need to put your consumerism first and realize that no one's going to be really there at the college showing you how to get the most money.
You need to be your own advocate first.
Right. You can't assume that the financial aid office is going to be your advocate, which many people unfortunately think it's like going to legal aid. They're going to assist you and show you how to do this. They're really not going to do that because they have their own bottom line to be concerned about.
So what about folks that this is simply beyond their ability to do?
Okay, well that's
another story.
Right, no, that's true, and that's a big problem they have out there about the process.
And what do we do about that? What do you say to those
The point again is the planning, you know, in terms of just going through the aid process. If you plan ahead, you're going to be better off because you're going to have some understanding of it before it becomes an emotional time period. But there are also, such as myself, consultants that help families. And for even most families, even if they're somewhat savvy, in most cases, for most of my clients, hiring me as a consultant, in the long run, they probably save more money than they pay me, and they save a lot of anxiety as well.
And certainly, this is a modestly priced guide for what a person can get.
Right, and our website has a link on there that they can purchase it through Amazon, or it's available in bricks and mortar bookstores as well.
I've read a lot, and I had somebody on before. What about the federal loan program? Is that someplace too where you've got to be there's different interest rates and different small print and different things to really look at before you sign on the dotted line?
Right, and that's something to be aware of, that a lot of families feel because the banks no longer participate in the federal loan programs that the loan programs don't exist anymore. That's not true. The federal loan programs, the Perkins loan for students, the Stafford loan for students, the PLUS loan for parents of undergraduate students, or the Grad PLUS loans for graduate and professional schools. Those programs are still there. Those generally federal loans are better than the private loans, but that's one of the unintended consequences of the elimination of the banks from the process, and families need to be aware of that. That a lot of the websites used to provide a lot of free information, and now those sites are going to be more likely to push students and families into the private loans that they offer because they don't offer the federal loans anymore. So you need to be aware that the free information out there on aid may be drying up because of that.
The free information may be drying up, but you can still walk into the bank and ask for it.
Well, no, if you go to the bank for a student loan, they're not going to offer you. They're probably going to have you say, here's a private loan we have for education. And the problem with the private loans for education is they tend to have higher fees, higher interest rates. The teaser rates you hear mentioned, very few students and parents qualify for. And those rates tend to be variable. So we're in a low interest rate environment. When interest rates pick up, those loans could be up to 15, 16, 18% interest, and you can't then, like a mortgage, refinance them into a lower rate when the time happens. You're locked in.
Sounds a little like the arm on the mortgages or something.
Right.
So there again, you have buyer beware.
Right. You need to be careful and understand with that the websites
How many years have
you
been doing this?
I've had my business now for over 25 years.
So you've been writing about colleges and cost of college for 25 years.
I've been working on that as a private aid consultant, and then the book is now coming out. Its 19th publication, and for the past few years, we've been graced with a foreword by President Clinton.
And as a summary statement, because we're about out of time, I guess it's fair to say the savvy away. Be as smart as your ability to be smart is, and plan as well as you can, because aid is out there, but you've got to be smart about it, nimble about it. Is that a fair conclusion?
Yeah, that's right. You want to work smart, not necessarily hard, but you want to work smart to get the money.
Okay. Thanks very much.
My pleasure.
Paying for college without going broke. You're watching Getting Your Money's Worth. Thanks for watching.